Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. Half a day after Robin and Andy were rescued, the riders of Noria arrived at the place where Nevriel had asked them to meet. Due to the importance of this endeavor, the stronghold had dispatched almost half of its manpower, which numbered a little over 500 dwarf warriors, 400 grade D apostles, 95 grade C apostles, 8 grade B apostles. This level of manpower was strong enough to wipe out any hostile forces within the territory of Noria. However, even Nevriel still doubted whether it was enough to raid the kobold nest. Usually, a kobold's nest housed thousands of kobolds. The kobold warriors were the weakest, followed by the kobold leaders. The kobold mages were stronger than the rest, and some of the older ones could reach rank 3. As for the draconic kobolds, their ranks were at rank 3 minimum. These special kobolds were known to break through to rank 5 once they got older. If there were a handful of rank 4 draconic kobolds, or even one rank 5 kobold, the riders of Noria would be in for a tough battle. Usually, rank 5 creatures wouldn't be found in any beginner areas. Simply put, they could be considered world bosses, because no one in the beginner's territory would be able to fight them one-on-one. At most, a group of 100 people that was composed of grade B, rank 3, and A apostles, rank 4, could fight it in a boss raid. Since Robin is already safe, then there's no need for us to risk our lives trying to raid the kobold's nest, one of the rider captains of Noria, who was a grade B apostle, said. We should just return to the stronghold and call it a day. The other riders nodded their heads in agreement. If Robin was still inside the kobold's nest, then they would surely charge in and do everything in their power to rescue him. However, since he was already rescued, the warriors of Noria didn't feel the need to rescue the dwarves who had been captured by the kobolds. For riders of Noria, they were not that important. Normally, I would agree with you, Boreas said, but this time it's different. We made an oath to the person that served as our guide to find this place that we would rescue his friends no matter what happens. We made this vow to the earth goddess, so our hands are tied. Nevriel nodded his head, which made the dwarf captains groan. The commander of the stronghold had come to personally supervise the rescue operation. He was the only grade A apostle, rank 4, in the territory of Noria, which made him the absolute decision-maker at all times. His name was Thoram, the commander of the stronghold of Noria. Thoram wore a serious expression on his face. He knew that he had to make a difficult choice. If he chose to ignore the oath made by Boreas and Nevriel, it was tantamount to abandoning them to their fate. If he did this, then his subordinates would no doubt be safe, but they would always have reservations when it came to following his orders. Nobody wanted to follow a leader who readily abandoned his men with only a moment's notice. This was not the way of the dwarves, and doing so would tarnish his reputation. On the other hand, if he chose to honor the oath, he would be gambling the life of his men to fight against an unknown number of kobolds. It was impossible not to have any casualties when raiding a monster den, especially a kobold's den. Thoram didn't want to see his men die in droves if they were to encounter a draconic kobold, whose rank surpassed theirs. Just as he was hesitating to decide what to do, a voice spoke out from behind him. We will go and rescue Colette and the others. All the dwarf warriors turned around to look at Robin, who stood before them with a serious expression on his face. I owe that half-elf a life, Robin stated. I will not be able to sleep at night, knowing that I abandoned the one that saved me when he needed me the most. I am a dwarf, not a goblin. I will not turn my back on those that had made their oath to the earth goddess. Robin scanned the faces of all the dwarf warriors who were looking at him with complicated expressions on their faces. So, tell me. Robin sneered. Are you dwarves, or are you goblins who abandon their kin at the first signs of trouble? The kingdom of Guellivan has no need for goblins. I am a dwarf, so I will do what dwarves do best. All of you can return to the stronghold if you want. I'm going to go and save my friends even if I have to do it alone. Andy and Helen stood beside Robin with determined expressions on their faces. Clearly, they also wanted to enter the cavern and save their friends to the best of their abilities. Thoram sighed as he knelt in front of Robin. I, Thoram, son of Malram of Thordrum, hereby swear that I will wield my axe to pave the path to victory. I swear this upon the honor of the Earth Goddess. All the warriors of Noria knelt toward Robin and thumped their weapons on the ground to voice out their approval. Robin nodded his head in acknowledgement as he patted Thoram's shoulder. Fight for victory, Robin stated. Fight for Gwellivan. For Gwellivan. It was at that moment that the 500-strong dwarf battalion of Noria marched towards the kobold nest with one goal in mind. To rescue Robin's friends, and fulfill their oaths to the half-elf who was now currently fighting for his life. Kobold nest, shit. Lux cursed as he and the dwarves held their weapons firmly in their hands. All of them were staring at the walls of their hiding place, as the sound of digging became stronger. Just as he expected, the kobolds had discovered that the men that they had sent to scout the dump site hadn't returned after an hour. The kobold chieftain and the kobold sorcerer dispatched 100 kobolds led by a kobold mage and 4 kobold leaders to the dump site and made them check what was going on. A great battle ensued when they arrived at their destination. Out of the 100 kobolds, 70 were able to retreat and report their findings to their kobold chieftain. After discovering that the escaped prisoners had holed themselves up in the dump site, the kobold chieftain sent the kobold sorcerer, who was the leader of the kobold mages, to take command of the kobold army. Instead of forcing their way into the narrow tunnel which led to their destination, the kobold sorcerer ordered the kobolds to do what they did best. Naturally, that was mining. Thousands of kobolds started to chip away at the walls that led to the dump site, while they positioned some of their troops to observe the tunnel that led to where the dwarves were hiding. This development had far surpassed Lux's understanding, which made him grit his teeth in frustration. After 3 hours of nerve-wracking tension, the sounds of the mining stopped, which made Lux frown. The sound of mining has stopped, Lux informed everyone. I don't know what they're planning, but everyone, brace yourselves. Diablo and the skeletal fighters raised their shields as they faced the wall. Ishtar was standing in front of the main entrance of the tunnel, ready to snipe the kobolds who would use that route to pincer attack them. Just as everyone was wondering what was going on, a loud explosion broke the wall in front of them. Dirt and rubble flew in different directions as the wall collapsed. It was hit by a fireball made by the kobold sorcerer. When the dust had settled down, a 2-meter-wide hole appeared in front of everyone. Soon, the blood-curdling war cries of the kobolds were heard as they charged down the path made by their brethren. Diablo and the skeletal fighters immediately formed a defensive wall using their bodies, continuously hacking the kobolds who were trying to overpower them with sheer numbers. If Lux hadn't upgraded his minions, the kobold might have stood a chance, but with Diablo's strength, which was now at the peak of a rank 3 monster, the rank 1 kobold warriors quickly died under his mythical blade. Lux and the dwarves could feel their hearts rising towards their throats as the battle turned more intense. Soon, even Ishtar, who was standing far away from them, had started to fire arrows at the main tunnel leading to their hiding place. Just like Lux had anticipated, the kobolds planned to do a pincer attack. Thanks to Ishtar's ice elemental damage, Kobold's advance was slowed down. Even so, it was merely delaying the inevitable. Everyone, get ready. Go to your positions. Lux ordered, this is a do-or-die moment, so do everything in your power to resist. Once the kobold breaks past our defenses, it's all over. So fight with everything you've got. Yes. As the battle in the dump site area intensified, the warriors of Noria had just killed the guards that were manning the entrance of the kobold nest. Over 500 strong warriors, with Thoram at the lead, ran through the passageway that led to the depths of the nest. A battle that had never before seen in the territory of Noria was about to begin. Fight! Lux roared as he activated his skill, Battle Cry. This was the skill that added plus 100 to both physical and magical attacks for all of his allies. With this boost of strength, his ordinary skeletal fighters' physical damage had reached rank 2, making them more formidable as they held back the charging kobolds. Diablo and 5 skeleton fighters blocked the newly created passage made by the kobolds, while Ishtar and other 2 of the skeletal fighters blocked the original narrow tunnel that the kobolds were using to form a pincer attack. The non-combatants hurriedly retreated to the very back of the cavern, leaving all those who could fight standing behind the skeletal fighters, who were ready to replace the latter the moment they died. Colette held her weapon firmly. But on the contrary, she couldn't stop her body from shaking. As someone who had already been defeated by the kobolds once in battle, she was well aware of how tenacious they were. They were one of the races that could use the strategy of overwhelming their enemies through sheer numbers with kamikaze attacks. It was at that moment when she felt a hand rest on her shoulder, gripping it firmly. "Are you scared?" Lux asked with a smile. Colette bit her lip. Her father had told her that she mustn't show any weakness, especially during a battle. She was a member of the Golden Slayer clan, a family of paladins. It was their duty to stand at the forefront of battle and lead their people to victory. And yet, right now, she was truly scared. Although she was doing her best to fight the growing fear in her heart, she was still unable to stop her body from shaking. Seeing that she couldn't bring herself to answer, Lux raised the hand he had placed on her shoulder and rested it over the little girl's head. "I am scared, too," Lux said as he shifted his attention to his subordinates who were keeping their enemies at bay using everything in their arsenal. "But, I have a goal in life. For the sake of that goal, I must make a stand, even if my heart trembles inside my chest." One of the skeletons fighting alongside Diablo shattered into pieces, and the half-elf raised his hand to summon another one to take its place. "For that goal, I must wield my weapons to fight," Lux added. "Also, there is someone, waiting for me back home, someone that raised me with love and care. If I fall here, she will be heartbroken, so no matter what happens, I must return alive." Lux smiled as he summoned another skeleton fighter after another died. Colette looked up at the half-elf who was like a strong pillar, who gave her, and everyone in that cavern, hope. "What is your goal, big brother?" Colette asked. She wanted to know what the half-elf, who came from a distant land, wanted to accomplish by coming to Elysium. "To save a dying world from destruction," Lux answered as he lightly patted her head. "And prevent it from being destroyed a second time." The red-headed teenager took a step forward as he summoned another skeletal fighter to block the narrow tunnel where the kobolds were advancing slowly. "That's why I asked all of you to trust me, and fight with me until the end," Lux declared. "We will not lose. I promise that I will lead all of you to the surface. So, children of the Earth Goddess, I bid all of you to stand, and carve a path to victory." The half-elf then charged forward as one of his skeletal fighters shattered. He took its place and engaged against kobolds in close combat, preventing them from breaking past their defenses. Colette and the other dwarves felt their blood boiling inside their chest. Although they were still feeling fearful, a small blaze of courage was rekindled in their hearts. The little blonde girl raised her mace and charged forward the moment another skeletal fighter got destroyed. She activated her paladin aura to strengthen her allies, and then continued fighting side by side with Lux and Diablo. "Diablo! Push them back!" Lux ordered. "Show these lizards who's boss." The glowing embers in Diablo's eyes burned brightly as he rammed the kobold in front of him with his shield. Lux's firstborn then pulled back his arm as he activated his AoE skill Whirlwind Slash. Lux's first-named creature annihilated all the kobolds in front of him as he assumed a protective stance to defend Lux and Colette from the kobolds, who had momentarily stopped their advance due to the pressure that he was releasing. Kakik. Diablo laughed as if he was finding his enemy's reaction very funny. Truth be told, he wasn't too worried about the monsters that he was facing. As a monster that had reached rank 3, very few monsters in the kobold's nest could beat him. Not to mention that Blood Moon was a cheat-like mythical weapon that broke the laws of the beginner's area. Dash. Blood Moon. Weapon type, one-handed sword. Rarity, mythical. Damage, 225 to 350. Requirement, all stats must be 50 or above. Additional requirement, only those recognized by Randolph can wield this weapon. Passive skills, Sharp Blade, Swift Blade, Lifesteal, Thorn, Indestructible. Sharp Blade. The blade of this sword will always be sharp and will never dull. Swift Blade. The sword feels very light, which helps its wielder brandish it with ease. Able to strike very fast in quick succession. Lifesteal. Each attack heals the user with 10% of the damage they deal to their enemies. Bleed. Has a 5% chance to apply the bleeding effect to your target with every strike. Bleeding effect reduces your target's health points by 1% of its maximum health points every 2 seconds. Bleed effect duration, 10 seconds. Indestructible. This weapon is indestructible. It cannot be destroyed. Dash. Diablo's defense was quite high, so he only received minimal damage from the kobold's attacks. With the help of the lifesteal ability that was imbued in his weapon, his health points were almost always full. Simply put, even if Diablo fought against 100 rank 1 monsters, a single whirlwind slash was enough to fully restore his health points. Seeing that things were not going their way, the kobold sorcerer decided to intervene and shot a fireball towards the defenders. Just like Diablo, it was a rank 3 monster who was very close to breaking through rank 4. The moment the kobold sorcerer cast its fireball, Diablo threw its bone spear, which met the attack head-on. When the two spells collided, a powerful explosion took place, negating each other's attack. Kakik. Diablo raised his sword and made a taunting gesture to the kobold sorcerer who was at the back of the kobold formation. The kobold sorcerer snorted as it unleashed fireball after fireball with the intention of obliterating the arrogant undead that dared to provoke it. Diablo continued to unleash his bone spears to meet the fireballs head-on. The loud explosions made the walls of the cavern tremble, causing Lux to frown due to the possibility of the cave crumbling. He had already dragged Colette back to the safety of the cavern, while Diablo stood in front and continued his barrage of bone spears. Just as the half-elf expected, the impromptu tunnel that the kobolds had made wasn't stable enough to handle the powerful explosion, which resulted in a cave-in. This sent dust clouds billowing in Lux's direction, forcing everyone to cover their faces to prevent themselves from getting dirt in their eyes. When the dust cloud receded, Lux glanced in the direction of his named creature and sighed internally. The cavern's entrance had been completely blocked by rubble, preventing the kobolds from continuing their assault on two fronts. It was at that moment when Diablo turned his head to look at Lux and gave him a thumbs up. Although it couldn't talk, its confident pose gave everyone the impression that it was saying the words, just as planned. Lux smirked, because the feeling of smugness coming from his named creature was being transmitted back to him. It was at that moment when he wondered if it was possible for Diablo to talk after a few more upgrades. The half-elf reluctantly put this matter aside as he summoned more of his skeletal fighters. Their fight was far from over, and he had no intention of letting his guard down until reinforcements arrived. Due to the battle happening at the lower layers of the kobold's nest, Lux had no idea that the reinforcements he had been waiting for had already arrived. Led by Thoram, the commander of Noria, the dwarf warriors used brute force to blast their way through the kobolds, which had detected their advance. After the incident of the others' escape, the nest was on high alert, so the kobolds immediately noticed the arrival of the uninvited guests in their domain. The kobold chieftain frowned after hearing his subordinate's report. Right now, their strongest warrior, the kobold champion, was currently leading their main force to subdue the goblins that had built a large settlement near their territory. It would take their reinforcements a full day before they could return to the nest, so the chieftain was contemplating his choices about what they could do for the time being. Just like the kobold sorcerer, the kobold chieftain was at the peak of a rank 3 monster. Their champion, the draconic kobold, was at the peak of rank 4 and was only a step away from breaking through to rank 5. The other draconic kobolds, which ranged from rank 3 and rank 4, had accompanied him to battle, leaving only the kobold chieftain and the kobold sorcerer to look after the nest. Because of this, only 7,000 kobolds remained inside the nest. Although kobolds weren't afraid to fight to the death, they still didn't like meaningless deaths. After knowing the strength of their opponents, the kobold chieftain estimated that they wouldn't be able to beat the dwarf warriors who had come to raid them. Since that was the case, he decided to personally handle the issue and came out to have a dialogue with the invaders, though Ram and his men brute forced their way against a horde of kobolds. Although the majority of them were rank 1, there were dozens of rank 2 kobolds mixed within their group. The battle was bloody as both sides fought tooth and nail against each other. After 2 hours of non-stop battle, blood dyed the ground, making Helen's expression very pale. Although the dwarfs were stronger, they still lost over 100 men as over 1,000 kobolds fought them with a ferocity that made even the most arrogant of dwarfs feel respect towards their enemies. After the battle ended, Thoram and the dwarfs took a short rest as they tended to their injured. They knew that there would be more battles up ahead, so they decided to recuperate for a short period of time before continuing their rescue mission. An hour later, they once again formed their ranks and braced themselves for another hard battle. Thoram and his men noticed that the kobold nest was surprisingly empty after they explored the middle levels of the nest. They didn't know that the kobold chieftain had issued a command for all the kobolds to retreat to the lower levels, in order to prevent them from dying needlessly. Word had also been sent to the kobold sorcerer about the new threat, so they decided to pull their forces, which were currently raiding the dump site, to regroup with their secondary force. Just as the warriors of Noria arrived near the end of the kobold nest's middle level, they noticed 7 kobolds standing in a spacious cavern, as if waiting for their arrival. None of the kobolds were carrying any weapons, but they did hold wooden sticks with a white cloth tied to them. Thoram frowned, but he made a gesture for his men to not do anything reckless. After seeing their reaction, the kobold chieftain briefly nodded its head and spoke using the universal language of the realm. "What is your reason for coming here, dwarves?" the kobold chieftain asked. Thoram took a step forward as he faced the kobold chieftain's indifferent expression. "You terrorize our lands and capture our people, yet, you still dare to ask why we've come?" The kobold chieftain's expression remained calm as he eyed the dwarf who seemed to be the leader of the raiding party. "Dwarves kill us kobolds, and steal the treasures we mine underground," the kobold chieftain stated. "Naturally we kill them back. It has always been like this, and will always be in the future." This time it was Thoram's turn to frown. To the dwarves, the kobolds were a race that liked to mine. Although dwarves liked to mine themselves, their passion didn't come close to what the kobolds felt about mining. There were times when these two races met underground while they were creating mazes in the depths of the earth. Wars between them were very common, and Thoram would not lower his dignity to refute the kobold chieftain's words. Since that was the case, he decided to get to the point and see whether both he and the kobold chieftain could reach a compromise. "We've only come here to rescue our people," Thoram declared. "If you give them to us and promise to not attack any more dwarves in the territory of Noria, we can have a non-aggression pact between our parties." "Do you have the qualifications to make this pact hold true?" the kobold chieftain asked. Right now, their priority was to wage war on the other monsters in the area in order to secure the safety of their nest. Also, they were patiently waiting for their draconic champion to evolve into a rank 5 monster. Once that happened, there would be very few creatures that could threaten their existence in the territory of Noria. "I am Thoram, the commander of the stronghold of Noria," Thoram replied. "This territory is under my jurisdiction, so yes, I have the authority to make this pact binding." Thoram didn't want to lose any more of their men in a fight against the kobolds, because they had more pressing issues at hand. The beast tide season was nearing, and they would need every dwarf fighter to protect the walls of Noria from the beast invasion. They simply didn't have time to deal with the kobolds at this point. If the stronghold of Noria could form a non-aggression pact with them, that meant that they could focus all of their attention in other areas that required their assistance. "Very well." The kobold chieftain nodded. Since both sides didn't want to wage a full-blown war against each other, a compromise was a welcome topic between the two forces. "Make an oath to your earth goddess," the kobold chieftain stated. "And you make an oath to the dragon king," Thoram countered. To the dwarves, the oath to the earth goddess was a sacred oath. Although the dragon king was not a god, for kobolds it was the ultimate existence they would offer everything to, even their lives. After the two sides made their oaths, the kobold chieftain asked one of his elite warriors to escort Thoram and his subordinates to the lower layers, where Lux and the other dwarves had holed themselves in. Lux and the other dwarves were in a state of tension as they waited for the kobolds to continue their attacks. The half-elf didn't know why the kobold's relentless assault had suddenly stopped, so he merely advised everyone to be on their guard. 2 hours later, the half-elf heard some noises that seemed to be heading towards their direction. When the half-elf stood up and went towards the exit, all the dwarfs prepared themselves to fight once again. However, before they could even raise their fighting spirit, Helen's voice echoed down the tunnel. "Big brother! Colette! Maddie! Axel! Are you guys alright?" Helen shouted as soon as she appeared in the narrow tunnel leading to the dump site. "Helen?" Lux couldn't believe that the little dwarf girl would appear on the lower floors of the kobold nest looking practically unharmed. "What are you doing here?" "We've come to rescue everyone," Helen shouted as she ran towards the opening of the cavern and hugged Colette. The red-headed teenager glanced down the tunnel and saw several dwarfs wearing armor. Clearly, these were the reinforcements they had been waiting for. However, he felt that something was off. "Helen, did you meet any kobolds along the way?" Lux asked. The kobold chieftain came to negotiate with the commander," Helen answered. "We now have a non-aggression pact with the kobolds. We can all leave this place safely." When Lux and the dwarfs heard Helen's words, most of them didn't believe it at the start, but after seeing that no kobolds were attacking the dwarves, they finally understood why the attack on their location had stopped. Lux breathed in a sigh of relief after confirming that Helen's words were true. Although he kept on showing a confident expression on his face to prevent Colette and the other dwarfs from panicking, deep inside, he was standing on pins and needles. After losing the tension in his body, his legs buckled and he almost collapsed on the ground. Fortunately, Diablo was standing beside him and managed to support him in time. "Big brother, what's this? Getting soft all of a sudden?" Colette teased. Now that they had been saved, the little girl's cheekiness had returned. The half-elf only chuckled and ruffled Colette's hair in order to get back at her. "Let's go back to Leaf Village," Lux said softly. "I want to take a long nice rest and a few days off from adventures." Colette and the other dwarfs felt the same way. With the protection of the warriors of Noria, all of them left the kobold's nest safely. Though Ram had sent 50 of his men to accompany Lux, Colette, and the rest of her party to escort them back to Leaf Village. Along the way, Nevriel and Lux had a private talk. The middle-aged dwarf had directly asked the half-elf what kind of reward he wanted for his help in guiding them to the kobold's nest, where Robin was held captive. Lux didn't plan to play the goody-two-shoes and reject the free rewards that were being offered to him. "I want weapons and armor," Lux stated. "The higher the quality, the better. Of course, if you plan to give me a mythical weapon, I will gladly accept it with open arms." Nevriel stared at Lux with a hawk-like gaze before leaving the half-elf's side. The red-headed teenager watched him go with a smile on his face. He was just teasing the middle-aged dwarf about the mythical weapon, but he wasn't lying when he said that he wanted weapons and armor. His summoned minions had gained the equip item skill, which meant that they could equip weapons, armor, accessories, and other miscellaneous items. If Lux could arm all of them to the teeth, then the forces he could wield would not lose to a dwarf party who had broken through the apostle rank. The swishing sound of a broom could be faintly heard in the surrounding area as Vera gathered the leaves that had fallen in front of their house. She had been doing this almost every single day ever since Lux left, because she had nothing else to do. After gathering the leaves into a pile, she took them to a part of the garden where she used them as mulch for other plants. After finishing her task, she went back inside the house and headed to Lux's room. Upon entering, she scanned the surroundings to see if there was anything amiss. Seeing nothing out of place, she waved her hand and used cleaning magic to clean it. A gentle breeze swept across the room, leaving a refreshing fragrance behind. Vera made sure to clean her grandson's room every day using magic to ensure that Lux's stay would be a comfortable one if ever he came back home to rest. She nodded her head in satisfaction once the cleaning spell ended. Just as she was about to leave, her gaze landed on a rainbow ball that sat on top of Lux's desk. It was something that she had bought from a passing merchant when Lux was only 2 years old. After picking up the ball, A nostalgic smile appeared on Vera's face as she remembered her adopted grandson's hardship when he was only 2 years old. 2 years after Vera saved Lux from the giant crocodiles. "Good morning, Grandma Vera." "Good morning, Lux. Are the two of you going out for a walk?" "Lux is growing up fast. It was just like yesterday when you adopted him as your grandson. After a few more years, he will definitely be a handsome boy." Vera smiled as she chatted with the residents of Wildguard Stronghold. Lux was a special existence within the stronghold, not because he was a half-elf, but because he was Vera's adopted grandson. The stronghold had 9 protectors, which ensured that it remained the overlord of the territory. There had been many occasions when the local and foreign warlords tried to invade the fortress in order to expand their domains. However, all of their ambitions were turned to ashes after these 9 protectors made their move. Vera was one of those protectors, so her status in Wildguard Stronghold was very high. As someone who their protector had adopted, Lux became a hot topic among the residents. Lux, who was being carried by Vera in her arms, sucked his thumb as he curiously eyed his surroundings. Whenever someone tried to lightly rub his cheeks, he would cry. Even if a beautiful girl kissed him, he would still cry. If someone attempted to talk to him, he would cry as well. This made Vera feel very helpless. Her grandson didn't like to be touched, kissed, or talked to by other people at all. As Vera neared the vast playground, where most of the children in the stronghold gathered, the thumb-sucking baby in her arms raised his head and looked at the children with great interest. His grandma would often bring him here to watch the other children play. But today was different. Vera took him to the playground so that he could interact with children of his age. As the old lady walked towards the left side of the playground, where a group of toddlers could be found, several of the ladies who had gathered there to look after their children stood up and gave her a brief bow. Vera waved her hand to put them at ease, before placing Lux down on the ground. As a 2-year-old, Lux was able to stand up on his own, but most of the time, he still preferred to crawl on all fours to get to where he wanted. "Lux, play with the other kids," Vera said as she coaxed her grandson to go to where the other children were playing. The toddler's area had a special protection magic around it that ensured that nothing dangerous would happen to any of the children. Vera had only taken a few steps away when she saw Lux following behind her. When she stopped, Lux grabbed hold of her leg and laughed. This made the ladies who had been watching over their children giggle. They had seen Lux several times in the past, but he was mostly carried along by Vera whenever she walked around the stronghold for her regular patrol. Seeing the little half-elf follow his grandma around like a little duckling made the hearts of the ladies melt. They couldn't help but think about how endearing he was. "Lux, don't you want to play with the other kids?" Vera asked. "Look, they are having fun over there." Vera pointed at a bunch of 2 to 4-year-old kids playing with colorful balls and small boxes that littered the playing area. Lux glanced at the place where Vera was pointing at and started to suck on his thumb once again. Seeing that an opportunity had arrived, the old lady lightly pried Lux's left hand, which was still clinging at her leg off, and jumped to the top of a tree where Lux wouldn't be able to see her. Since Lux was still a baby, he didn't notice right away that his grandma had disappeared from beside him. The moment he turned his head to look back, Vera was no longer in sight. The little half-elf turned his head in every way, searching his surroundings, trying to find his grandma. A minute later, when Lux still couldn't find Vera, he started crying, calling out to his grandma. "Manhwa. Wah. Manhwa. /n, Manhwa is mama and grandma combined." The little half-elf was bawling his eyes out, making the ladies who were watching him earlier get a strong urge to hug and coax him until he no longer cried. However, they didn't dare move from their location because they knew that Vera was just up in the tree beside her grandson, observing his every move. "Manhwa. Manhwa." Lux cried and called out repeatedly until his face became flushed. Anyone who saw him right now would feel heartbroken because of how pitiful he looked. Vera sighed because she realized that Lux might not be ready yet to play with the other children. Just as she was about to jump off the tree, Lux suddenly collapsed and laid on the ground without moving. The ladies who saw what happened cried out in alarm and stood from their seats. They were about to go and help Lux when Vera appeared by his side. The old lady picked up her grandson and immediately checked his condition with a spell. The result baffled Vera because according to her medical knowledge, Lux was perfectly fine. The old lady then wiped the tears and snot on her grandson's face before leaving the scene to visit her friend, who was Wildguard Stronghold's healer. She was not a medical expert, so she decided to let her friend do a full diagnostic check on her grandson to find out what had happened to him. He's not in any serious danger. At least, for now, the strongest cleric in Wildguard Stronghold, Natasha, said with a frown. There's nothing wrong with his body. But, do you remember what I told you when you brought him to me after you returned to the stronghold with him? Vera nodded. You said that he might have been exposed to a soul-damaging spell, which may leave him with some problems growing up. Yes, Natasha stated. Back then, he was still too young, so these problems weren't obviously showing. Now, it's different. This is a side effect of his soul being damaged. Although it is too early to tell, I have a feeling that he will lose consciousness anytime he is faced with very strenuous situations. Worst-case scenario, it might be triggered when he experiences any kind of strong emotions like happiness, anger, sadness, or depression. Vera looked at her grandson with an anxious expression before looking back at her friend, who was still in the middle of casting a diagnostic spell. Is there any way to cure him? Vera asked. Just tell me what things you need, I'll get them for you. Natasha sighed and shook her head. This is beyond my capabilities. I've already tried to use my powers, and even gave him a very strong elixir a year ago. I thought that it would help his soul heal over time, but it didn't work. Then, what should I do? Don't let him feel any stress or encounter stressful situations. Bring him to me for regular checkups so I can observe his condition all the time. Maybe, just maybe, we will be able to figure out a way to rid him of this sickness before he becomes old enough to enter Elysium. After leaving her friend's house, Vera carried her grandson back to their residence. When she was halfway through their journey, Lux opened his eyes and looked drowsily at Vera. After seeing that his grandma was in front of him, he hurriedly wrapped his arms around her neck and once again started to cry. Clearly, the little half-elf had been scared silly earlier, and still hadn't gotten over the fact that Vera had disappeared without him noticing. There, don't cry, Vera coaxed as she lightly patted Lux's back. Don't worry, Grandma will not leave you again, okay? So stop crying. It took Vera a full 5 minutes to coax Lux enough to get him to stop crying. It was at this moment when she passed by a merchant stall in which several items were laid out for sale. In order to apologize to her grandson, Vera bought the rainbow-colored ball from the merchant and gave it to Lux to play with. Surprisingly, the little half-elf loved Vera's gift and played with it a lot. There were even times when he would faint while playing with the ball due to how excited he was, which had made Vera panic several times because of how sudden it was. Time flies so fast, Vera muttered as she lovingly placed the ball back on top of the desk. She missed the days when Lux was still young, but she also understood that he couldn't remain a child forever. This was why when Lux decided to go to Elysium, she had given him her silent consent and passed her family's special techniques to him. Vera hoped that it would be enough to keep Lux safe when he faced dangerous situations. Just as she was wondering what to cook for lunch, she felt a fluctuation inside the house. Vera didn't hesitate and ran towards the training room. The moment she opened the door, a handsome half-elf with red hair and eyes as green as emeralds turned his head to look at her. I'm back, Grandma, Lux said with a smile. I missed you. The old lady walked towards her grandson and hugged him tightly. It had been more than a month since Lux had come to Elysium, so she had also missed him terribly. Welcome back, Lux, Vera replied as she lightly ruffled her grandson's head like usual. Your hair has grown a bit long, do you want me to cut it for you? Is it that long already? Lux asked as he scratched his head. Yes, Vera answered with a smile. But, we can do that later. Have you eaten? What do you want to eat for lunch? That day, Vera cooked all of Lux's favorite dishes. The half-elf ate a lot because it was tasty and he had missed his grandma's cooking. After the meal, Lux told Vera about his adventures in Elysium. Vera smiled as she listened to her grandson's bragging. She found it funny when Lux told her that he single-handedly fought a kobold's nest. As someone that had fought these monsters in the past, how could she possibly believe her grandson's exaggerated tale? Well, as long as he is safe, that is all that matters, Vera thought as she praised Lux for his amazing performance. They had been finally reunited after more than a month of parting, so Vera had no intention of ruining Lux's good mood, and allowed him to brag as much as he wanted. While the grandma and grandson pair were spending some quality time together, news of what happened in the kobold's nest had reached the ears of the high-ranking personages in the kingdom of Guellivan. By the time that the half-elf returned to Leaf Village to continue his adventures, he would understand that the dwarf race was not a race that should be taken lightly. "I'm going now, Grandma," Lux said as he hugged Vera. "I'll come and visit as often as I can." Vera hummed as she lightly patted her adopted grandson's head. "I'll always be here waiting. Be safe, Lux." The red-headed teenager reluctantly took a step back as he looked at his grandma's gaze filled with affection. It was the face that had watched over him all these years and showered him with love and tenderness. In his past lifetime, Lux had no goals in life. This time around, he had two goals in mind. The first one was to help save the world from destruction, and the second goal was to make his grandma proud of him. He wanted her to know that all the sacrifices she had made for him all these years were worth it. More than anything else, he wanted the world to give Vera the recognition she deserved. And for that to happen, he must return to Elysium. Back to the world that held the secrets on how Solais could be saved from its predetermined destruction. "Take care, Grandma. I love you," Lux said as he pressed his fist over his chest. "Open, Heaven's Gate." Lux turned into particles of light and disappeared. Vera smiled as she placed a hand over her chest. She was very happy that her grandson was doing well in Elysium. She knew that this parting wouldn't last forever, for in time, the little half-elf, who she had raised since he was a baby, would return to her side once more after he grew tired from his adventures. Leaf Village. After returning to Leaf Village, the first thing that Lux did was to visit his blacksmith master, Randolph. He had already returned Blood Moon to his master's custody because the mission had ended. However, Lux was thinking if he could borrow it again for a short period of time to accomplish a great undertaking for the village. Although he didn't want to rely on the mythical weapon for help, the mission he planned to accomplish was impossible to complete without it. However, just as Lux entered the business district of the village, several familiar faces ran towards him with smiles on their faces. "Big brother!" Colette called out as she happily jumped at him with her arms opened wide. The half-elf had no choice but to catch the adorable little girl who seemed to have become more lively after spending a few days back home. After the battle in the kobold's nest, Colette and her friends returned to Solais in order to see their families. This was a very natural custom for dwarves, especially after managing to survive a near-death experience. After swinging the little dwarf round and round a few times, Lux placed her back on the ground and lightly patted her head. Colette, on the other hand, grabbed hold of Lux's hands and held it firmly in her two little hands. "Big brother, I have thought about this for a long time. You have risked your life a few times to save me, and for that I am very grateful," Colette said with a serious expression on her face. "That's why, in order to repay you, will you please, marry?" Lux gulped, because Colette was looking at him with a flushed expression on her face. The half-elf waited with bated breath as the little dwarf finished what she wanted to say. Matty, who was watching this scene, immediately became alarmed. He then gave Lux the "I'm going to kill you if you marry Colette" glare, which made the red-headed teenager have the strong urge to slap him. "Will you please, marry my big sister?" Colette pleaded. "That way, you will be part of our family." "Eh?" Matty, who was about to draw his sword, ready to hack Lux into pieces, stopped midway. He then looked at Colette and patted his chest in relief, before glaring back at Lux, who had a dumbfounded expression on his face. "Marry your big sister?" Lux blinked once then twice in confusion. Yes. Colette nodded her head. My big sister is very beautiful. She has many suitors, but if I help you, your chances of marrying her will be very high. Don't worry, even if you are not a dwarf, I will vouch for you. Lux wanted to scratch his head using his left hand, since his right was firmly held by the excited little dwarf who was looking up at him with sparkling eyes. I'll think about it, Lux replied in helplessness. He felt that if he rejected Colette's offer right away, the little girl would throw a tantrum and pester him until he said yes. Good. Colette smiled. For now, she was satisfied with Lux's answer. After going back home, she had told her parents and her sister about how Lux had saved them inside the kobold's nest. Colette's parents and older sister were quite surprised because they understood how difficult it was to fight against a horde of kobolds inside their nest. Because of this, the little girl's father even prepared several gifts to repay Lux for saving his daughter's life. Big brother, this is for you. This came from my family. It's a thank you gift for saving our lives. Colette procured a silver ring from her magic bag and gave it to Lux. Please, accept it. Lux didn't stand on ceremony and accepted the silver ring from Colette's hands. Right now, he wouldn't reject any goodwill that would help him become stronger in Elysium. When the half-elf glanced at the contents of the ring, he found 20 rank 2 beast cores and a blue bow with intricate designs. Out of curiosity, Lux took out the bow from the storage ring to give it a closer look. It's a good bow, Lux said as he held it in his hands. Right now, he didn't have the ability to appraise things because he still hadn't learned the skill yet, but it was not a problem because he had the Elysium Compendium. Any item that could be found in Elysium was recorded inside the mythical item that Lux had acquired through gacha. After summoning the compendium in his hand, the information for the bow appeared, and Lux wasn't able to stop himself from whistling after reading its contents. Heartstriker, Bow of the Forest. Weapon type, longbow. Rarity, unique. Requirement, dexterity 80. Damage, 125 to 160. Increase range attack damage by 20%. Passive skill, shot to the heart. Shot to the heart. Deals double damage if your attack hits the heart area of your target. This ability works with normal and skill-based attacks. Thank you, Colette, Lux said with a smile. This is just the thing that I need. I'm glad you liked it, big brother. Colette smiled back. She was quite happy that Lux liked the gift that her father had prepared for him. Although she hadn't seen Lux use a bow before, she believed that since her big brother was a half-elf, he was blessed with the ability to use a bow perfectly. What the cute little dwarf didn't know was that the reason why Lux was happy was because he was looking for a weapon to give to his skeleton hunter, Ishtar. With Heartstriker in her possession, her long-range attacks would be even more deadly. Maddie, Helen, Axel, and Andy also gave Lux various gifts that came from their family. Although they didn't present Lux with any weapons, all of them gave him 10 rank 2 beast cores, which made the half-elf very happy. Are you angels? Lux asked as he accepted the beast cores with gratitude. The last time I checked, today is not my birthday. Huh? Did the kobolds clobber your head on our return trip? Maddie snorted. This is just our family being grateful to you for saving our lives. Mark my word, this won't happen ever again. I will never, ever, be placed in a situation again where someone else needs to rescue me. Colette, Helen, Axel, and Andy all nodded their heads in agreement. Their experience inside the kobold's nest wasn't a good one. Because of this experience, they wanted to become stronger. The next time a similar situation happened, they wouldn't be as helpless as they had been previously. Lux could understand what they were feeling because he also thought the same. As long as he could become stronger than his enemies, then he wouldn't have to worry about being placed into a dangerous position. Big brother, what are your plans for today? Colette asked. We plan to look for the carbuncle in the aspiration plains. Would you like to join us? Carbuncle? Lux frowned as he returned the bow to his storage ring. The carbuncle was the alpha beast of the aspiration plains. It was the Lord of the Horned Rabbits and a support-type monster that healed and buffed its allies in battle. Of course, when put to a pinch, this meter-tall beast was capable of attacking its enemies with physical and magical attacks. It was also very fast, which made it a difficult adversary for a party whose members still hadn't stepped into the apostle rank. The reason why Colette proposed to attack the carbuncle was due to Lux's performance in the Cobalt's Nest. After seeing Diablo's strength, as well as the other skeletons under the half-elf's command, she was very confident that they would be able to beat the weakest of the alpha beasts of Leaf Village. Colette's offer was very tempting, and Lux also knew that they were indeed capable of challenging the carbuncle. However, the plan he had in mind must take precedence. Now that the Riders of Noria had a non-aggression pact with the kobolds, who had resorted to banditry in the past, their hands were now more free to handle some tasks that they had set aside beforehand. One of these tasks was dealing with the mosquito infestation that was still happening in the Figuro Gardens. Lux wanted to deal with this menace before the Riders of Noria were dispatched to the scene. As long as he could borrow Blood Moon from his master, Randolph, again Lux was confident that his skeleton party would be able to decimate the mosquitoes that had forced the Adventurers Guild to prevent everyone from entering the Figuro Gardens. "There is something that I need to do first, but I'll probably be back within 3 days, Lux replied after organizing his thoughts. "If you can wait till then, I will be more than happy to challenge the carbuncle with all of you." "Okay." Colette readily agreed to Lux's proposal. "Let's fight the carbuncle in 3 days. This is a promise." "Right, big brother?" Lux nodded. "I promise. I will return in 3 days and fight the carbuncle with all of you. Also, I won't fight with any of you for the monster drops. All of you can have it. Big brother, you are the best." Colette grinned as she gave Lux a thumbs up. After talking about a few more things, the group parted and went to deal with their own business. Lux resumed his journey to his master's workshop while time was still on his side. He hoped that before the Riders of Noria arrived, he would be able to finish the task that he had set out to do. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee. Or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. Your purpose is good, but can't you just wait until the Riders of Noria handle this mission? Randolph, the blacksmith of Leaf Village, asked. Now that the kobolds are no longer a problem, it is only a matter of time before they resume handling the problems that they have set aside due to the kobolds' wanton banditry. It is exactly because of this reason that we should strike now, Master, Lux countered. Right now, there are so many monster materials that can be looted from the Figuro Gardens. Are we going to let the Riders of Noria take them all? Randolph's expression eased up a bit, and Lux knew that he was faltering. All he needed to do was give his master one more push before the latter agreed to lend him Blood Moon for a few days. Well, I'm going to be honest. It does tempt me, but the answer is still no, Randolph replied as he crossed his arms over his chest. Listen, Lux, I don't want you to rely on the mythical weapon to boost your progress. Since you are my disciple, I want you to resume your studies of blacksmithing. I'm sure that after a few years, you will be able to craft mythical weapons. No, Master. Lux corrected. I won't settle for mythical weapons, I will go for legendary weapons. Randolph looked at Lux with a dumbfounded expression before roaring in laughter. Ha ha ha. Yes, you're right. Randolph patted Lux's shoulder in a good mood. As my disciple, you are bound to create legendary weapons. This is something I expect from the person I have chosen. Lux grinned because he was only just a step away from achieving his plan. Now that he had stroked Randolph's ego, it was now time to strike while the iron was hot. Master, I will be honest with you. I have a feeling that the mosquito's growth is suspicious, Lux said. There has been no record that such a thing has happened in the past. Something must be causing it, and the secret lies in the north end of the Figuro Garden. Randolph rubbed his chin because he couldn't refute Lux's hypothesis. Just as he said, there had been no incidences in the past where a mosquito swarm of such magnitude had appeared in the place where insectoid monsters roamed. Although the elders of the village looked calm on the surface, deep inside they must be very worried. A mosquito monster outbreak wasn't a joke, and compared to the undead outbreak they had experienced not long ago, this one was potentially more dangerous. It was so dangerous that the houses which still didn't have basements that the residents could hide in, had no choice but to cooperate with the earth mages of the village. These earth mages used their magic to dig an underground shelter to be used for an emergency, in the off chance that they didn't have time to go to the main shelter. Lux, I know that your main purpose in asking for Blood Moon is to take advantage of the situation, Randolph stated. However, as one of the elders of the village, I still have to consider the well-being of everyone that lives here. If I lend you Blood Moon for a few days, are you confident that you will be able to deal with the mosquito swarm? Lux smiled as he held up 2 fingers from his hand. Without Blood Moon, my chances to accomplish my goal is only 20%, Lux admitted. However, if I have Blood Moon, my chances will rise to 60%. Master, I think it is worth it to take a gamble. I know you have skeleton summons to handle the dangerous stuff for you, but can you assure your safety in this mission? I can. Lux patted his chest with confidence. He had no intention of dying in Elysium because he knew that his grandma would be sad. So more than anything else, he had always prioritized his safety above all others. This was why he wanted Randolph to lend him Blood Moon. It was to ensure that his mission would become a huge success. Very well, Randolph relented. I will lend you Blood Moon, but only for a few days. After you finish this expedition, you will not ask me to lend it to you ever again. Do I make myself clear? Lux nodded. Yes, Master. The two talked about the details of how Lux would safely accomplish his mission. Hearing his plan made Randolph scratch his head in disbelief. He had thought that Lux had only planned a simple means to keep himself safe, so he was surprised to hear that his disciple also planned to hide in the underground tunnels of the ant nest to ensure that no mosquito would find him. After knowing that his sole disciple was truly going to play it safe, Randolph lent Blood Moon to Lux with peace of mind. As long as the half-elf wouldn't risk his life to fight against thousands of mosquitoes, the blacksmith of Leaf Village was willing to entrust him with the greatest creation that he had made in his lifetime. Ah, Master, I need another favor from you, Lux said after receiving Blood Moon and re-equipping it in Diablo's equipment slot. There was one more important thing that he needed to do in order to maximize the rewards of his expedition. Well, as long as it's not unreasonable, I will think about it, Randolph replied. Since he had already agreed to lend the half-elf his weapon, a little favor wouldn't hurt. Lux smiled as he told his master the contents of his favor. After hearing his request, Randolph nodded his head in agreement. Now that his goal has been achieved, Lux made preparations to enter the Figuro garden under the cover of darkness. The mosquitoes were more active around this time, and Lux was sure to find them instantly. Looking at the beast cores that had been gifted to him by the parents of his friends, Lux planned to upgrade his skeleton party and have them attack the mosquitoes, and collect as many monster parts as possible during his expedition in the Figuro gardens. Lux locked himself up inside his room in the inn and looked at the beast cores he had in his possession. From fighting with his life on the line in the cobalt's nest, as well as the rewards that were given to him by the parents of Colette, Maddie, Helen, Axel, and Andy, the half-elf had acquired a good number of beast cores which would make his team a lot stronger. 151 rank 1 beast cores, and 80 rank 2 beast cores. That was the total number of beast cores that Lux currently possessed, which made him feel giddy whenever he thought of it. I'll upgrade Ishtar and the skeleton archers for now, Lux muttered as he held a rank 2 beast core in his hand. Our opponents are flying creatures, so range attacks will be more effective than melee attacks. Lux then checked Ishtar's current rank as he applied one beast core after another. After using 20 rank 2 beast cores, Ishtar's rating went up from D+ to C, which upgraded her overall stats. She also learned the passive skill Hunter's Eye, which allowed Ishtar's to lock on a single target and attack it with greater accuracy from great distances. Lux spent an additional 27 rank 2 beast cores to raise her rating to C+, which allowed her to learn 2 active skills, namely Arrow Shower and Piercing Arrow. Arrow Shower, as the name suggested, allowed Ishtar to shoot a magical arrow where it would split into multiple arrows that would rain down on her enemies. This was a very effective AoE attack, especially when dealing with enemies that were grouped together. Piercing Arrow, on the other hand, was a skill that allowed Ishtar to fire a charged arrow that could pierce through armored units, or monsters that had very tough skin like dragon scales, exoskeletons, etc. Of course, when certain arrows were paired up with the piercing arrow skill, their effectiveness would increase, turning them deadlier. For example, an adamantium arrow was an arrow that was strong enough to pierce through dragon scales. If Ishtar were to use the piercing arrow skill, alongside the adamantium arrow, the arrow would embed itself deeper inside the monster's body, causing greater damage. Ishtar. Named Skeleton Hunter. Rating, C+. Mana, 10. Progress, 0/1, 000. Health, 5500/5500. Mana, 2550/2550. Attack, 180 to 215, plus 160 Heartstriker. Attack type, ranged ice damage. Strength, 80. Intelligence, 85. Vitality, 80. Agility, 85. Dexterity, 115. Active skill, Hunter's Mark, Set Trap, Arrow Shower, Piercing Arrow. Passive skill, Equip Item, Hunter's Eye. Title, The Forgotten Queen. Note, sometimes I aim to please. But, most of the time, I aim to kill. Lux smiled after seeing Ishtar's character information in his soul book. After admiring her stats and skills for a minute, he then shifted his attention to his skeleton archers, whom he intended to upgrade until they matched the strength of his skeleton fighters. Let's go big time on this one, Lux smirked as he consumed all 151 rank 1 beast cores, and turned them into 1510 skill points. Lux used 1,300 skill points and upgraded his skeleton archers 4 times, which made them evolve into skeleton grand archers. These upgraded skeleton archers had also acquired powerful skills like the crippling volley and Vulture's Eye, which gave Lux the confidence that he would be able to accomplish his goal without fail. Crippling volley. When 4 or more skeleton grand archers are together, they will be able to activate this unique ability that allows them to fire a volley of magical arrows that have a high chance to paralyze their enemies. Vulture's Eye. Allows the skeleton grand archer to see further by 200 meters. Summon Skeleton Grand Archer. Rating, B. Mana, 10. Progress, 0/800. Summons 4 Skeleton Grand Archer to fight for you. Summon duration, 4 hour. Skill cooldown, 1 minute. Health points, 2000. Attack, 100 to 150. Attack type, physical range, damage. Active skills, triple shot, crippling volley. Passive skills, fast reload, Vulture's Eye. Dash. Just to be on the safe side, Lux used 17 rank 2 beast cores to upgrade Diablo once, making his vanguard even stronger. The skeleton rider was already his party's strongest melee unit. However, since Diablo was also the wielder of Blood Moon, Lux decided to strengthen him to make him more formidable in battle. Diablo. Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary. Name Skeleton. Skeleton Rider. Rating, B+. Mana, 10. Progress, 10/800. Health, 10,500/10,500. Mana, 1,940/1,940. Attack, 280 to 335, plus 300 damage from Blood Moon. Attack type, ethereal damage. Strength, 98, +1. Intelligence, 97. Vitality, 96, +2. Agility, 97, +2. Dexterity, 97, +2. Defense, 83, plus 250 defense. Title, Firstborn, Squad Captain, Relentless Charger. Active skills, Slash, Heavy Slash, Bone Spear, Duel, EX, Whirlwind Slash, Leap. Passive skills, parry, tactician, improved dodge, union of man and beast, enhanced fortitude, intimidate, new. Lux still had 220 skill points remaining, which he set aside for the time being so they could be used for future upgrades. Diablo had also learned the skill Intimidate, which struck fear in monsters that were equal or weaker than it in rank. Monsters affected by the Intimidate skill would have their attack speed and movement speed decreased by 30%. Diablo and Ishtar are now rank 2 monsters, while my other summons are at the middle stage of rank 1 monsters, Lux thought as he glanced at the information of all the creatures under his command. Back then, he thought that it would take him a long while to gather resources in order to fully upgrade his minions. Gathering beast cores was not an easy task, especially at the start when one was going solo. If not for the fact that he had been generously rewarded by Colette's parents at the beginning, as well as having the chance to take advantage of the Figaro Garden and Cobalt Nest incidents, Lux would not have reached the stage he was in right now. Now that his minions had all evolved and became stronger, Lux was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief as he finally overcame the insecurity he'd felt over the past few years. For 4 years, he was barred entry to Elysium because of his weak body. Now, even though he had been left behind by his friends in Wildguard Stronghold, who had gone to the higher areas of Elysium, Lux no longer felt envious of them. For he knew that after just a year, he could catch up to them. And a year after that, he would surpass all of them. "Grandma, just wait for me," Lux said as she stood up to leave his room. "A few months from now, I will surprise everyone in Wildguard Stronghold. I will show them how awesome your grandson is." The half-elf left the inn with a serious expression on his face. His destination was the Figaro Garden, and he would not return until his storage bags, storage rings, and his enchanted beast ring were filled to the brim with resources that would make his master Randolph laugh until all of his teeth fell out of their sockets. The buzzing of mosquitoes could be heard in the darkness of the night. Ever since Lux had left to save Colette and the others, the numbers of mosquitoes had increased significantly. In fact, there were now so many of them that the ecosystem of the Figaro Garden was in danger of being overturned. The first thing that the half-elf did when he entered the garden was to look for the nearest ant nest where he could hide. The ants recognized Lux right away because he was the only half-elf that visited the garden, not to mention that he had become their business partner as well. After chatting with the ants for a bit in order to get a general situation of the garden, Lux immediately summoned his skeletons and put them to work. Diablo, along with 7 skeletal fighters, stood at the ready. Ishtar as well as 4 skeleton grand archers were waiting for Lux to give them orders. Lux admired his team of skeletons and grinned evilly as he gave them the order to move out. Their first destination was the lair of the red-eyed terror mantis, who, according to the ants, had already spawned after it was killed a few weeks ago. After his nice long chat with the ants, he had come to the understanding that all the other insects were now rallying behind the red-eyed terror mantis in order to resist the red-striped predator mosquitoes, common monster, obsidian spite mosquitoes, rank 1 monster, and scaled torment mosquitoes, rank 2 monster. Truth be told, Lux had a feeling that there might be mosquitoes whose tiers might have reached rank 3, or worse, rank 4. This was something that the half-elf didn't want to see. He was afraid that if a mosquito had really reached rank 4, there would be a new boss in the Figaro Gardens, and it wouldn't be the red-eyed terror mantis. A mosquito boss would be much harder to deal with. As they drew closer to their designated location, the buzzing sound also intensified. The red-headed teenager was monitoring the situation using Diablo's eyes and ears, while hiding inside the ant's nest. There was simply no way that he would take the risk and accompany his summons to fight against thousands of mosquitoes that could suck his blood dry and turn him into a dried husk. His team of skeletons slowed their movements as they observed the ongoing battle from afar, a never-seen-before team battle between hundreds of the insects that resided in the Figaro Garden against the mosquito swarm that outnumbered them 5-1. The half-elf was delighted as he watched such a scene because, for him, all of the monsters were simply free skill and stats points that were waiting to be claimed by him. As body parts of monsters piled up on the ground, Lux noticed that the majority of those that had died were simply common monsters. In the monster world, common monsters were merely cannon fodder that could be used to exhaust the enemies. The true combatants were the rank 1 and rank 2 monsters, who were engaged in mortal combat. While everyone was fighting, Lux was looking for the red-eyed terror mantis, who was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, several giant flowers were sliced apart as the alpha beast of the Figaro Gardens entered the scene. However, the half-elf noticed that the red-eyed terror mantis didn't enter the fray right away. Instead, it looked in the distance, eyeing a dozen-meter-long mosquitoes, whose exoskeleton had taken a greenish hue. After using his Elysium compendium to identify the new monsters, the red-headed teenager found that his fears became a reality. Ruthless venom mosquitoes, Lux muttered. Rank 3 monsters. Although these dozen rank 3 monsters were weaker than the alpha beast, their numbers still posed a problem. Just like the name implied, these mosquitoes carried a powerful venom in their bites, which had a high chance of poisoning their target. Aside from that, there was also a medium chance that their victims would become paralyzed in just one bite as well. With this deadly combination, the rank 3 mosquitoes were something that the red-eyed terror mantis wouldn't dare attack recklessly. Since the big shots were simply eyeing each other and not making any moves, the battle of the lower ranks raged on. The fight was so intense that the half-elf thought that their skirmish would end in less than 15 minutes. What should I do? Lux thought, should I help the insects? Or should I help the mosquitoes? The red-headed teenager pondered this question for a bit as he eyed the battlefield with a serious expression on his face. After weighing the pros and cons on who to help, the half-elf ordered his skeletons to help the mosquitoes vanquish their enemies. Although he knew that this was the wrong thing to do, Lux simply went ahead with his plan due to one simple reason. Mosquitoes only drink blood, they don't eat beast cores, Lux muttered. Since that is the case, I'll just help them kill the other insects faster. Don't think badly of me, this is just pure business. After receiving Lux's orders, the skeletons sprang into action. They immediately attacked the insects and targeted their wings and legs, crippling them and allowing the mosquitoes to go in for the kill. Diablos, Ishtars, and the skeleton's appearance had a profound effect on the battle. They were high-ranking monsters, so their battle prowess was enough to tilt the advantage in favor of the mosquitoes. The red-eyed terror mantis screeched in anger as it opened its wings to fly towards Diablo and the others. However, Ishtar's ranged attacks, that were imbued with the ice element, slowed its movement by a good margin. Seeing that an opportunity arrived, the ruthless venom mosquitoes joined in and attacked the alpha beast from all sides. This was the effect that Lux had wanted to achieve, and he couldn't help but laugh madly while he was inside the ant nest. That's it. Die and give your beast cores to me. Lux laughed. No matter what happened, he would get the red-eyed terror mantis body parts this time without fail. Back then, he was forced to compromise and sell the parts of the alpha monster to Frederick and his party. Now, it was different. He was hunting the alpha beast solo, while using the mosquitoes as a way to weaken it. The monster parts of the red-eyed terror mantis were very valuable. Its exoskeleton could be used as armor, while its claws could be used to forge a unique sword. However, Lux didn't plan to forge the weapon right away. The reason? Because the Elysium compendium had reminded him that a better weapon could be crafted using 10 claws from the red-eyed terror mantis. If crafted properly, the weapon had a high chance of becoming a pseudo-mythical weapon that had a sharpness that could cut through steel. In order to achieve this, the red-headed teenager needed to fight the alpha monster 5 times, in order to collect 5 sets of claws. This was something that beginners knew nothing about. In fact, there were only a handful of individuals in the entirety of the Guellivan kingdom who knew about this, and all of them were master and grandmaster blacksmiths. Randolph was a master blacksmith, so he also knew the recipe of this pseudo-mythical weapon. However, he kept his lips shut tight and would only buy these monster parts from the dwarves, at a very high price, silently. In fact, Blood Moon was made with 5 sets of claws from the red-eyed terror mantis, teeth from the forest wolf king, and the beast cores of 3 high-ranking noble vampires, whose rank was no lower than Viscount. Creating this weapon was no easy feat because the chances of failure were high. Fortunately, against all odds, Randolph had succeeded and the mythical weapon Blood Moon was born. As Randolph's disciple, he had learned the recipe from his master, which made him want to craft a Blood Moon of his own. Because of this, he decided to just collect the parts he needed while he was still in Leaf Village. That way, he would be able to craft the weapon that made Diablo a killing machine. After the mosquitoes gained the advantage in battle, Lux ordered his skeletons to slowly back away to the outskirts of the battlefield. He was quite far from the location of the battle, and he didn't want to lose any more of his forces. Among the 7 skeleton fighters, 3 had died in battle. The skeleton Grand Archers suffered no losses, because they were attacking from a safe distance, and were protected by Ishtar. The half-elf had also ordered Diablo to not use any of his flashy moves, so that Blood Moon's ability would be hidden from the high-ranking monsters. He planned to deliver the coup de grace when they least expect it, giving them no time to evade the deadly blow that would end their lives. Just like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole from behind, Lux manipulated his forces to attack the insects that were a safe distance from the battle being waged between the rank 3 mosquitoes and the alpha monster that ruled the Figuro garden. The red-headed teenager knew that the alpha monster was not an easy opponent to beat, but he would be damned if he allowed the rascal to get away after he had decided to claim its monster parts as his own. Diablo, pay extra close attention to the red-eyed terror mantis, Lux ordered. Once it enters its berserk state, pull out as fast as you can. Stop all hostilities against the insects and get as far from the battlefield as possible. The half-elf knew that in that brief period of time when the red-eyed terror mantis entered berserk mode, its stats would double, and it would become unstoppable. He planned to wait patiently until the berserk effect wore off, before going in for the kill. In the meantime, Lux had resummoned the skeletal fighters that died and ordered them to regroup with everyone in battle. Although the journey from Lux's location to Diablo's was several minutes away, he figured that it was enough time for his forces to regroup and take advantage of the weakened alpha monster so they could end its life once and for all. Due to Ishtar's and the skeleton Grand Archer's harassment of the red-eyed terror mantis, the mosquitoes were able to take advantage of the situation and collectively bombarded the mantis with venomous sprays that whittled its health away. The other insects who realized that their leaders were losing the battle decided to shift their attention to the skeletons that had appeared out of nowhere. However, Diablo stood in front of his subordinates and fought with Blood Moon in hand. Although 2 more skeleton fighters died during the collision, Diablo was more than enough to hold off several enemies at once. After all, he was a rank 2 monster, and he had a mythical weapon on hand. The mosquitoes had figured out that the skeletons were on their side, so they used this opportunity to deal significant losses to their enemies. In the end, Diablo and only 2 other skeletal fighters remained as the vanguard, while Ishtar and the skeleton Grand Archers fired volley after volley of attacks aimed at the red-eyed terror mantis in the distance. 5 minutes later, the eyes of the red-eyed terror mantis glowed brightly. This was a sign that it was about to use its berserk skill, which Lux and Diablo had been waiting for. As soon as the alpha monster showed signs of going berserk, the skeletons immediately stopped attacking and ran away like there was no tomorrow. A few seconds after they left the battlefield, an angry screech that was similar to nails scratching a steel resounded in the surroundings. The red-eyed terror mantis berserk state doesn't happen right away. It was a gradual strengthening that increased all of its stats by 50% after several minutes had passed. The best way to fight against it was to let it activate berserk, then run away until its duration ended. All alpha beasts and field bosses had berserk skills. This was why they were the hardest to fight, and also why they were more dangerous than normal monsters. The red-eyed terror mantis was a high-tiered rank 2 beast. Although it was only rank 2, it was stronger than most rank 3 monsters. Once it entered its berserk state, its strength would reach the middle stages of rank 3, which would put it on par with a rank 4 monster at its peak. Since it was a high-tiered monster, its health and defenses were stronger than most, so it was impossible to fight it alone, even if the opponent was also a rank 4 monster. Lux had looked for all of the information related to the red-eyed terror mantis because it was one of the most dangerous alpha beast in the beginner's zone, only second to the field boss, the forest wolf king. Those who had reached the rank of apostles would usually challenge this alpha monster as proof of their strength before leaving the Leaf Village, just like Frederick's party did when their party had reached the apostle rank. Powerful gusts of wind blew in every direction as the red-eyed terror mantis unleashed a devastating attack against the mosquitoes that had encircled it. Its sharp claws sliced anything in its path, including the rank 2 monsters, the scaled torment mosquitoes. The ruthless venom mosquitoes, who were rank 3 monsters, stayed outside of its attack zone and only hurled venomous sprays from afar. The alpha beasts knew that it was fighting on borrowed time, so it jumped towards one of the rank 3 mosquitoes like a cannonball. It then opened its wings for an extra burst of speed, closing the distance in 2 heartbeats. The mantis claws sliced the ruthless venom mosquito's wings cleanly off its body, which made the rank 3 monster fall to the ground. Surprisingly, the mantis didn't go for the kill. In fact, the moment it landed on the ground, it leapt towards another mosquito and sliced its wings in half. Mosquitoes can walk and crawl, but their speed was nothing compared to how fast they could fly in the air. The moment they landed on the ground, several angry insects, who were weaker than the mosquitoes, mobbed them, despite the latter being stronger. One by one, the rank 3 mosquitoes fell on the ground until only 4 were left. These mosquitoes had already flown to a height that couldn't be reached by the mantis, which prevented the alpha monster from continuing its rampage. Since that was the case, the mantis focused its attention on the rank 3 monsters that it had crippled earlier and were now being attacked by the angry insects that they had terrorized for days. Even so, these mosquitoes were still rank 3 monsters, so they overpowered their enemies and killed them one by one. The red-eyed mantis was really the only one that could cut through their defenses, and that was what it did. It slashed at them repeatedly until green blood oozed out of their bodies. After killing the last ruthless venom mosquito, the glow on the alpha monster's eye waned, signaling that its berserk state had passed. This was the moment that Lux and the mosquitoes were waiting for. After seeing that their nemesis had stopped moving, the remaining ruthless venom mosquitoes swooped in for the kill. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to suck the alpha monster's blood dry, and gain the chance to evolve into a higher species. This was the ultimate goal of all creatures. Even common monsters had the ability to evolve, but only if they consumed enough beast cores, or if the requirements for their evolution was met. The skeletons, who had now returned to the outskirts of the battlefield, observed this from afar. Although they were all made up of bones, a look of anticipation could be seen in the flickering lights within their hollow eye sockets. Lux, who was safely hidden inside the ant nest, smiled evilly as he waited for the battle to end. The alpha beast was on its last legs, and it was only a matter of time before it fell. Right now, it was a race against time for both the mosquitoes and the insects that were putting up a strong resistance until the red-eyed terror mantis recovered from its weakened state. The 4 remaining ruthless venom mosquitoes swooped down from the sky and then sprayed venomous sprays at the mantis, which had just transitioned into its weakened state after using its berserk skill. The alpha beast was helpless against the ranged attacks that rained down on its body. The most it could do was raise its claws, taking on a defensive stance, covering as much of its body as it could. Its strong and sturdy exoskeleton was covered in venomous sprays in no time, but the terror mantis was mostly unaffected by the mosquito's attack. Feeling impatient at their lack of progress, the ruthless venomous mosquitoes decided to try some hit-and-run tactics and used their sharp and powerful needles to pierce the mantis' protective armor in an attempt to inject their venom directly inside the latter's body. Out of the 4 mosquitoes, the mantis was able to seriously injure one of them after it came close to its strike range. The other 2, the mosquitoes, were able to pierce its armor and inject their venom, but the 4th barely evaded a ferocious swipe that was aimed at its head. Seeing this scene, Lux knew that he needed to do something, or the alpha beast would recover from its lethargic state. He no longer cared about being the one to deal the finishing blow to the mantis. All he cared about was that it died. Ishtar and the skeleton archers fired volley after volley of arrows, while Diablo and the 2 remaining skeleton fighters stood in front of them, serving as shields and protecting them from insects whose attention had shifted to them. Ishtar's attack was incredibly deadly, especially when it was up against an unmoving target. The skeleton hunter used her bow's exclusive passive skill, Shot to the Heart, which dealt double damage if it successfully hit the spot where the target's heart was located. Although the alpha beast was using its claws to shield that part of its body, Ishtar didn't care. For her, it didn't matter whether the mantis was blocking her attack or not. If the alpha beast chose to block her attack, then the mosquitoes would be able to attack its blind spot, using their sharp needle-like mouths to pierce its body. Ishtar activated her skill-piercing arrow, which pushed the alpha beast from where it stood with its powerful impact. Just as Lux expected, the mosquitoes used this opportunity to attack the mantis in its blind spots, making it shriek in pain. Ishtar didn't relent in her attacks, and fired one piercing shot after the other. Soon, the red-eyed terror mantis decided that it had had enough and decided to go all out and kill as many as it could before it died. Unfortunately for him, Ishtar's passive ability to shoot ice arrows had greatly slowed its movement and attack speed, which made its last attempts futile. It was also at that moment that Ishtar's arrow pierced its chest, making it shriek in frustration. The passive skill, Shot to the Heart, activated, dealing great damage to the mantis, pushing it one step closer to its death. 2 minutes later, the alpha beast of the Figaro garden uttered a blood-curdling shriek before collapsing on the ground. It had breathed its last, which signaled the end of the battle. The surviving insects hurriedly escaped because they knew that, without their leader, they no longer stood a chance against the mosquitoes. The ruthless venom mosquitoes greedily pounced on the dead mantis and sucked its blood. It was the reason why they had attacked its domain, and they wouldn't leave until they had drained all of its blood. The lower-ranking mosquitoes, on the other hand, flew after the insects that ran away. Because they knew that there was no way that they would get a share of the alpha beast, they chose to settle for the other insects who were running away in every direction. While the ruthless venom mosquitoes focused their attention on the mantis, they didn't notice that a small team of skeletons had already made their way to their location. Without any warning, Diablo leapt through the air and stabbed Blood Moon on the back of the head of one of the mosquitoes that had received a serious injury during the battle against the red-eyed terror mantis. The ruthless venom mosquito instantly lost its life, not knowing how it died. Its companions were a bit slow to react, so Diablo was able to thrust its sword to another mosquito, aiming at its left eye. At that exact moment, a whistling sound was simultaneously heard and a magic arrow pierced the mosquito's right eye, embedding itself directly into its brain, dealing critical damage. Diablo's sword also pierced the mosquito's left eye at that exact moment, which dealt critical damage as well. The combined attack between Lux's two named creatures was executed with perfection that their target had no time to react, which led to its death. Suddenly, a shower of arrows poured like rain on the location where the two other mosquitoes were about to take flight. The Grand Skeleton archers had activated their team attack, Crippling Volley, which had a high chance to paralyze their enemies. The two mosquitoes' bodies stiffened as the paralyzing effects of the attack activated. Diablo kicked one of the ruthless venom mosquitoes, sending its body flying into the air before targeting the other mosquito, which was struggling to move on the ground. A magical arrow flew straight and true, piercing a spot on the back of the mosquito's body where its heart was located. Ishtar and the Grand Skeletal archers focused fire on the fallen mosquito, while Diablo and the two remaining skeletal fighters gangbanged the other one. The mosquitoes looked at the skeletons in anger because they thought that they were on the same side. What they didn't know was Lux and his team weren't on anyone's side. Their goal was to take advantage of the situation and collect as many beast cores and monster parts as possible. After a few minutes of one-sided beating, the two rank 3 mosquitoes finally died. Diablo hurriedly activated the enchanted beast ring and stored the body of the red-eyed terror mantis, as well as the bodies of the 4 mosquitoes had just been slain. Ishtar and the other Grand Archer skeletons regrouped with Diablo and began the tedious process of beast core collection. Lux's skeletons had acquired an inventory after they got upgraded. Although it wasn't big, it was more than enough to store 100 beast cores per skeleton monster. The fun part about this item inventory skill was that Lux could directly transfer those items from the skeleton's inventory into his through the soul book. This was something that was never heard before in Elysium, and the half-elf felt that Ariel had tweaked his soul book to allow such things to happen. It was the only explanation Lux could think of, and he was more than happy to abuse this feature. It's too bad that the monster storage ring has a limit, Lux muttered. If possible, I'd like a few more of those. The half-elf knew that storage items that could store the monster's entire bodies cost a lot. However, he understood well that buying those would be worth it. If he happened to kill a rare monster in the future, bringing it back, instead of dismantling its body and only taking the most important part of its body, would be more profitable. While Lux's skeletons were busy prying the beast cores from the dead insects on the ground, the sound of buzzing once again permeated the air. The red-headed teenager knew that their time was up. Although he wanted to get as many cores as possible at this time, he couldn't allow his cover to be blown at this point in time. The mosquitoes thought of Diablo and the others as allies, so it would be a shame to not take advantage of it. In the end, Lux unsummoned his skeletons to make sure that no traces would be left behind. This was a safer option than letting the mosquitoes discover what they had been doing while they were going after the fleeting insects that had escaped the battlefield. 5 of my skeletal fighters are already on their way to that location, Lux thought. It will be more than enough time to let the mosquitoes drink their fill before I order them to resume the collection of beast cores. Lux grinned evilly as he summoned Diablo, Ishtar, and the rest of his skeletons one by one. They would return to the Leaf Village and dispose of the monster parts in his master's smithy, so that they could free up some space for the second round of looting. He was sure that Randolph wouldn't mind if he left those monster bodies behind. In fact, he believed they the dwarf would be more than happy to take the monster's bodies off his hands, especially the body of the red-eyed terror mantis. They made a deal earlier that Randolph would take the mantis parts, except for the claws, as compensation for letting Lux use Blood Moon. Lux didn't mind sharing those things with his master, because this would not be the first and last time that he would be fighting the red-eyed terror mantis. He was planning on collecting enough mantis claws until he had enough to forge his own Blood Moon. This way, he would no longer need to borrow his master's mythical weapon. Lux believed that with hard work, he would be able to craft a mythical weapon of his own. All he needed to do was patiently collect the items that were needed before leaving the beginner's area, the Dwarven Kingdom of Guellivan. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.